Let's begin by just sitting together for 2 minutes. Quiet. Feel the flow and the touch of the breath in your nostrils. If you have a mantra, let the mantra come. Otherwise, the name of your favorite name for divinity or Soham. Om. Good morning, everyone. It was in 2009 that we had a visit at Swami Rama Sadhakagram in Rishikesh from Darius Plukinis. And Darius was very interested in bringing some of the Himalayan tradition of yoga meditation to people in Lithuania. And so he asked me one day, would you come and do some lectures? And so we found a time for me to come in a summer when Vaidas and Devi were doing a yoga camp. And so I landed in the middle of this yoga camp. Nobody knew me. It was pretty interesting. And I have such fond memories of that particular occasion. We had the opportunity to sit together outside under the trees, which I don't get to do very often. And it just flowed so beautifully. We had a wonderful time. By the closing of the retreat, there were a number of people who wanted to receive mantra initiations, so we did a bunch of those. And after that, Vaidas contacted me and said, maybe you should come back next year and do a silent retreat, a 10-day silent retreat. And I said, oh, that's a lot to start with. Let's maybe do something a little less ambitious, let people have an opportunity to learn the tradition and the techniques of meditation that we use, and then do a silent retreat down the road. I like to have people build up their skills gradually. What Vitus was having none of it. He said, no, we have to have a 10-day silent retreat. So you come and that's what we'll do. So that's what we did. And quite counter to my expectations, it turned out so beautifully. And I came back every year for the next almost 10 years. And actually considered my time in Lithuania to be my summer vacation because Lithuania is so much like Minnesota, where I live. It's an area, with such beautiful woods and lakes and so many things about Lithuanian culture that I really came to love as I came to know them gradually. It seemed to me that every time a person in Lithuania had a serious problem to deal with, their first instinct was to go for a walk in the woods, at least among the people that I knew. And that was just a beautiful thing. So I've always had a special feeling in my heart for your country and for this group. And I'm so happy to be able to join you, even at a distance at this point, because of the health issues that I've encountered over the last couple of years. I had a series of surgeries and I'm really just back to my what I consider now to be my full strength at age 75. Um, Not quite 75, that's coming in December. Um, and I'm not yet sure whether I'm going to take up my international travel itinerary or not yet. Uh, some students in Hungary were kind enough to find me an oxygen concentrator that I can use for the machine that I sleep with at night, which makes it a little easier to, a little more possible to travel. It still is the size of a small carry-on bag, so I haven't tried it on an airline yet, but I will make that experiment sometime this year. So now is the preparation for a period of silence. Probably the most important practice in the scope of practices that we refer to in yoga by the word tapas. And this word tapas is much misunderstood. The translation that's made into English and other European languages is usually austerity, asceticism. And when people hear that word, most of the time they go, oh, don't like that. I have to deny myself stuff I want, you know? Um, and that's our model for most practices of austerity. It's a model of self-denial. We think of fasting as being not eating food. That's not what fasting is. We think of celibacy as not having sex. That's not what celibacy is. And just in the same way, we think of silence as just not talking. That's not what it is. And I want to start off by just changing this idea of what tapasya is. Because ultimately, tapasya ought to be the greatest joy that you have in life. Otherwise, why do it? You know, why put yourself through all this stuff? You know, these usual interpretations of tapas as self-denial, they don't work. They never work. You know, it's so common that people go on silent retreats and they're very nice and silent for, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, a month, whatever. And the silence period ends, and all of a sudden, their minds and their mouths are going a mile a minute. Or most of our conventional religious traditions of fasting across all different traditions. In Christianity, for 40 days before the celebration of Easter, we enter the period of Lent, which is usually thought of as a period for self-denial, for fasting. And what happens on Easter morning? Big pig out breakfast. Fast. And that's not really fasting. It's not really a practice of austerity. It's a practice of binging, purging, and binging, to put it in sort of psychological terms. So I want to give you a different way of thinking about tapas. Tapas is about making your mind full, making your mind full of, let's call it beatitude, full of beauty. The most treasured scriptures in Christian tradition by those who really practice Christianity, amazingly few these days, are the Beatitudes in the book of Matthew, where Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor, for they shall see God. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. You know, blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit the earth." What does he mean by that? Are these literal promises? No. The promise here is that you fill this attitude of reverence for the beauty in the world. That is sometimes so hard to see, I think, particularly in these politically troubled times, as we go through this process all over the world of changing our polity, changing our how we live with each other. This is a historical cycle. It happens over centuries. There's a period of everything falling apart, and then we put everything back together again. And we seem to be in a falling apart period, especially in my country. Oh my God. Oh. So, how do you deal with that? You deal with that by filling your own mind with an awareness of the presence of divinity all around you. Swami Veda used to refer to this attitude as Atma Tattva Avalokanam in Sanskrit, meaning Avalokana, looking around, for the Atma Tattva, for the essence of self, for the spiritual spark at the core of your being, which resonates with the divinity that is at the core of everything around you. And as you practice over the years, gradually you get this intuition that God is out there somewhere. He's just hiding. You just have to try to find him. And so you start to look more carefully at everything that goes on in your mind and your heart, everything that goes on around you. What I'm telling you is that the life of tapas, the life of so-called austerity, is a life of greater fullness, of greater joy. And the important central piece of this is that the practices of tapas across all of the different practices that we do, fasting, celibacy, silence, all of it, is about learning to replace pleasure in your life, the satisfaction of desire. And those pleasures are there all the time, pushing at us through our instinctive desires for food, sleep, sex, self-preservation. Replacing simply satisfying those desires with a life where you replace it with the joy of seeing the beauty in all of those things. So, for example, one of the things that's great about the retreat in Lithuania is that the food is always really good. Food is terrific. And it's interesting because, at least in the past, I'm sure that Vaidas is doing this the same way this year. We would only have 2 meals. So we eat less often. But we have an opportunity to focus on the beauty of the food. And the people that come to cook the food at this retreat are chosen because they do it as a spiritual discipline. They do it with an effort to put all of the love in their heart into the food. So look for that love as you taste your food. And you will taste your food better than you ordinarily do when you're just satisfying the appetite. So what happens as you do that, as you feed your heart By increasing the beatitude in your mind field, by seeing better the beauty all around you, you make those appetites less. The appetites begin naturally to reduce. You taste your food more acutely, so you don't need to eat so much of it. You eat something beautiful and delicious and you taste it and you really appreciate it. And then some part of you wants more and you think, oh, do I really need to taste that again? I tasted that before. It was beautiful. So tapas is about filling your mind with beautiful awareness and awareness of beauty in every way. And these retreats that we go on, these silent retreats, are an opportunity for all of us to intentionally give our efforts to trying to deepen that kind of awareness in our life. Is this just for 10 days? Not really. 10 days is an introduction. And if it goes well, and I think it will, you come to the end of that 10 days and you think, why, how can I keep this going in my life? I feel wonderful. And so you take those practices out into your everyday life. And over time, as you come back to doing retreats where you have the time and the space to practice the things that our ordinary life doesn't give us time to practice, you develop a kind of hunger for more of that beautiful experience. And so over time, you may decide to do longer periods of silence. So we usually start people with a day or two because most people are not used to being silent. And as they gradually build up their skills, then they go to 5 days, then they go to 10 days, then to 30, then to 40 days, then to 90 days, 3 months, then a year, then 5 years. I know one person who's done the 5-year retreat. And he did it in preparation for leaving his body because he knew he would leave his body soon. And Swami Veda did the same thing. He entered a period of a 5-year silence in 2013, and he ended up leaving the body after just 2 years of that practice. Now, it's interesting because did Swami Veda talk during that silence that he had? Yeah, he did. He would speak from an inner attitude of silence. And as a result of that, people heard him more clearly. This is one of the secrets that parents of small children know, right? If you start yelling at your small child, what do? They turn down the volume on their ears. They stop hearing you because it's so loud. So if you really want to say something serious to your child, you learn to speak in a very quiet voice. Same thing in the practice of austerity. As your mind becomes more quiet, your ears open up, and everything you do gradually becomes an expression of that practice of austerity. Why? Because it's beautiful. Because it gives you joy. One of the things that Swami Veda worked with me about for most of my life, really, were food issues. And one time after our retreats in Lithuania, we would very often take a couple of days to relax on the Baltic Sea coast. And so one time we were out on the Baltic coast and everybody was gathered around and Davy was cooking dinner. And people began to ask her whether it was a problem for her to cook food for people on the day when she was fasting. And this whole conversation began about her practice for many years of fasting 1 day a week. And it was just beautiful discussion. I'd often toyed with the idea of some practice of fasting, but I never really figured out how to make it work for me. And I'm sitting here listening to this beautiful conversation. All of a sudden, my guru's voice comes in my right ear and says, "Okay, it's time." That's all it took. And so from that time, I have fasted 1 day a week. And it's been a lovely practice. It's beautiful. I fill my mind with with space, with beautiful space. I enjoy not being bogged down in the process of digestion. And I don't miss the food during that day. What feeds me on that fasting day is the beauty of the open space that it creates in my mind. So let that be your practice of austerity. Don't torture yourself. I mean, Swami Rama used to say to us American students, he said, "You're not allowed to fast. None of you can fast. Because when you fast, you just eat nothing and you wreck your bodies. You hurt your bodies." In India, when they do a fast, most of the time they don't stop eating altogether. They just exclude certain foods. And that's almost entirely the rule in the way that Hindu people undertake a fast. My Muslim friends, when they go into Ramadan, they all tell me they gain weight during Ramadan. Why? Because they don't eat anything or drink anything while the sun is above the horizon. But when the sun goes down, party time, right? So if you fill your mind and your heart with this beauty of awareness, you won't be as hungry. And when you do decide to taste your food, you really taste it. You taste the art in the making of the food. You taste the love with which the food was made. One of my little hobbies when I was traveling a lot, going to teacher training programs around the world, we would often go out to eat in restaurants. So I started writing restaurant reviews for TripAdvisor. I have about 800 of them up there. And I developed this technique or this criterion, I should say, about the food that I was eating. If it was technically, but I didn't feel the love in it, only 4 stars. They don't get 5 stars unless I feel somebody's heart in the food, unless there was some joy and some love in the process of making the food. How do you know this? Because when you get up from that kind of a meal, there is a sort of inner smile that's not about being physically full, but it's about being spiritually full. When I feel that, then I know somebody's really cooking with love. And then I give them 5 stars. And the food at the Lithuanian retreat comes pretty close. So practice your austerity from fullness of heart. Practice your austerity in a way that gives you more joy. You'll have a better life. You know, people think of St. Francis in the Christian tradition. They think, oh my God, how he suffered from all of those austerities, and he didn't suffer. Swami Francis did not suffer. Everything he did in his austerities gave him greater joy. When he was walking on the road and he encountered a pilgrim whose clothes were rattier than his, he would touch the feet of that pilgrim with tears in his eyes and beg to trade clothes. Why? because it helped him reduce his ego. It helped him take his sense of self-importance out of the way of his relationship with divinity. It made him happy to do that. That's austerity. That's tapas. And that's silence. So how do we practice silence if we're not just not talking? Not talking is a beginning practice. It's really about focusing on increasing the amount of time in your day that you give to cultivating mindful awareness, to living your entire life, feeling the flow of breath in your nostrils and allowing that awareness to infuse itself into everything you do. When you do that, you notice more. You notice more about how your mind functions. You realize that the thoughts in your mind, which you may have thought were you, they're not you. There's something that you have, there's something that you do, but they're not who you are. It gives you a little distance from your thoughts. And so that means that you can work with your thoughts a little better in terms of how they guide the energy of your emotions in your life. Same thing with emotions. Emotions are something you have and that you do. They're part of your mind field, but they're not who you are. And if you really pay attention to them mindfully, it's not that you make them go away. That's not the point. You see them more clearly, and you understand more about how they work, not only in your mind and your heart, but also in conjunction with your body. So you begin to experience your discomforts differently too. Your pain. You know, in my 70s, I've had a number of health problems that have given me a fair amount of pain. And that pain has turned out to be a really important teacher to me. If I can be mindful about my experience of my pain, really pay attention to it and learn from it, I learn how to live with it better. I end up having a relationship with my pain, which means that the overall volume of it is less. It doesn't have to shout so loud to get my attention. So even the pain and the suffering in your life becomes a sort of teacher to you. Once you master having that kind of relationship with your mind and your heart, you don't need an external teacher so much. You begin to access the guru at the core of your own mind. And the only reason for having a teacher in a body is to help you reach that point. To reach you have that ability to see yourself more clearly, externally and internally. So we start in the practice of silence in several ways. The first thing we do is we stop talking for a while. And in the beginning, that can be unfamiliar to people. But pretty soon, you begin to feel different. You begin to feel more energy, more sense of mindfulness to you. We also practice physical stillness. This is one wonderful reason why you have this fabulous Hatha Yoga teacher, Ashutosh Sharma here, as both his friend, his brother, and also as a critic. I think he is the best Hatha Yoga teacher in the world because he manages to merge the meditative cultivation of mindful awareness with everything that you do physically with him. And that contributes to a kind of stillness in your mind that allows your body to be still when you sit in meditation. Don't be surprised if by the end of this retreat, you're able to sit a little longer comfortably as a result of that practice of physical stillness. Another important practice for silence is what we call Indriya Gupti. This word Gupti means to protect, to guard. Indriyas are the senses. And there's a whole interesting etymology to that in Sanskrit that I won't go into. But it's guarding your senses, managing your senses. So, for example, when you walk in the woods, your eyes are not wandering all over the place, looking at everything. Keep your gaze focused about a meter ahead of your feet as you walk. You reduce the visual field. Same thing with your hearing. In a silent retreat, you withdraw your sense of hearing a little bit. Okay. So think about these simple practices. These are actually things that you can take with you into the rest of your life. And probably in some way, if you have a good experience here at this retreat, you'll find yourself doing some of these things in your day-to-day life. Just thinking here about what sort of initial things to talk about. Obviously, when you are eating your meals, really taste your food. So often, when we're eating, we love interacting with the people around us, but that takes our awareness away from the food. Here at a silent retreat, you can really focus. So go ahead and focus. We have subtle body practices in the evening, and we'll learn a whole series of those in the Himalayan tradition. Those of you who have been to previous silent retreats know this sequence pretty well, and it gives the people who are just learning a chance to practice these before we try to go into a practice of yoga nidra towards the end of the time. Those are also things that help you to maintain your bodily awareness. We used to spend a lot of time in our yoga teaching, Ashu and I, telling people how to breathe, how to lay down in shavasana, breathe with your diaphragm and your abdomen. And we discovered that when people were following our directions like that, they were doing something very artificial, something that didn't look very natural at all. So finally, we both began saying, and I definitely took Ashutosh's lead in this, he would just say, let your breath flow. How often do you hear him say, let your breath flow? Because the moment you start to pay attention to your breath, all sorts of things begin to happen automatically in your nervous system. You turn on the part of your brain that is continually organizing the whole nervous system. You sort of take control of that process of reorganization. So you begin to reshape how your nervous system works. So those practices of relaxation and breath awareness play a vital role in how you gradually cultivate a peaceful nervous system that, for example, doesn't get shocked by loud noises or somebody coming up behind you. You manage to maintain a sense of steady state relaxation most of the time. There's another part of your brain, and this is a part that has a number of different structures along the midline of your cerebral cortex. And in neuroscience, we refer to this as the default mode network. This is all of the pre-programmed behavioral sequences that you have. And it's good that They're habits, yes. But when your life is being threatened, you need to respond on the basis of habit because you don't have time to think about it. If you're walking down the path and all of a sudden there's a cobra there in front of you, you don't think, oh, that's a snake. What kind of snake is it? Oh, should I be worried? Is it dangerous? No, you just jump out of the way. You get out of there because you have that pre-programmed in your nervous system. So that part of your nervous system exists to protect your life, and it's very important. The problem is that so many of our other habits end up being posited there. So this default mode network is people's ordinary sense of self. It's what I call your brain on autopilot, how your brain runs your life when you're not paying attention, when you're not being mindfully aware. Because what happens when you turn this switch on by exercising breath awareness is the default mode network goes dark, goes quiet. And so gradually over time, as you become more and more mindful, you learn to live your life more and more intentionally. And all of these practices in the silent retreat help you to deepen that ability to live your life more intentionally in the time after the retreat. So, we won't refer to the end of the retreat as the end of the silence. It's not. It's a transition to a different framework for the silence. Let's put it that way. Your quieter mind will begin to draw the people around you. The best news you can possibly get about the progress in your meditation is that somebody comes to you and says, yeah, I don't know what it is about you, but I just feel better when I'm with you. Your quiet mind becomes like a magnet that draws other people. And that's how we're going to reorganize the world. That's how we're going to change things, ultimately. Dealing with Russia, dealing with Trump, dealing with Orban in Hungary, with all of the little petty tyrants all over the world. This is how we change that. We do it in gatherings like this. We do it one person at a time as you take that silence out into the world. We also do that in our monthly full moon meditation, which will fall during this retreat on the 10th. The time for Europe, well, you know the time for Europe. I don't need to tell you that. But those meditations create a field of peacefulness that will gradually change the world. The change will be slow, probably not our lifetime. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Buddha started 2,600 years ago, and the effort is still not complete. But we need to do our part in that. So change the world by changing yourself and the people around you, by bringing a quiet mind to them and a quiet heart, a heart that invites them into meditation. At this point, I'm going to see what sort of questions people may have about the practice of silence. Now, Ashu hates this. I'll just warn you. He hates it when I invite questions. We always had this fight going in the silent retreat because people would write questions on pieces of paper, and a lot of time in the lectures during the day, I would respond to those questions. And that was I thought, quite a helpful process in terms of teaching, but it does create some noise in the mind. And Ashu, bless his heart, is all about making all of that quiet. So we'll continue our little friendly disagreement about this for the moment. Questions? Oh, I see you've started already. You're ahead of yourselves. Wonderful. Fantastic. That is actually how the guru teaches. People go to lectures and they listen to blah. I sit down in front of a group of people and I tell the same stories over and over. And sometimes I actually ask people, I say, I've told you this story a million times. Every time people say to me, just as I said to Swami Veda, no, Swamiji, I don't think we've ever heard this before. Why? Why do we do that? We don't do it because of the words. We do it because of the silent presence. We do it because it places our mind in a position to be able to listen enough to hear that, what the Old Testament and the Bible calls the still small voice that spoke to Elijah in the cave. Which cave? Some cave in the Middle East? No, this cave in your own heart. That's where the guru really does his real teaching. Swami Rama built this wonderful ashram in the United States in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. But every year, for several months, he would return to India to spend time with his master while he was in the body. And he told us that most of the time he would be there for months. They wouldn't speak one word. They knew how to communicate in silence. And that's what this practice of silence ultimately teaches you to do, to listen for the voice and the presence of the guru in your own heart. I feel him there now. He's listening to me. And when I sit down with you, I hope I bring a certain presence that helps you into the same state, into the same frame of mind and heart that allows you to hear that small voice in the core of your being that is the voice of the guru. That guru has no body. Every once in a while, that energy will enliven a body, as it did with Swami Rama. And to the extent that that person can take their personality out of the way so that that light can shine through them, we call them guru. But the guru is never a person. The guru is always that voice that calls to you from inside. That's why we give people mantras. The mantra is the guru's song calling you into meditation. And so you learn to listen to that song as it gets subtler and subtler and subtler. At first, It's a bunch of words that we repeat. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. So we sit there and use our mala to sort of count our way through. It's just the beginning. Then as you sit, all of a sudden, you realize the words are gone, but the mantra is there. That presence is there. That feeling is there. Follow that. A lot of people in their meditation practice get very anxious when the words start to melt away. Don't worry about it. It's a good sign. It means things are going deeper. And you keep listening as that mantra becomes more and more subtle, and eventually it will take you all the way. Again, maybe not in this lifetime. When Buddha first developed the intention to become enlightened, from that point, it took him 500 incarnations to become the Buddha. So there's time to practice. We have time. But gradually, as your practice of silence deepens, you learn to listen more and more subtly to that voice in your own heart. At this point in my life, probably in the last quarter of it, I would guess, the individual practices aren't so important. I still do my sitting meditation every day. Yeah. But what really matters to me is how am I meditating now? How am I meditating as I sit with you? How do I bring that mindful awareness into everything I do so that all day I'm practicing tapas, whether it looks like tapas or not? Who cares what it looks like? Sometimes great spirituality is practiced in ways that looks otherwise to people. You know, tantric masters have been known when they have disciples that are too good. The tantric masters will sometimes send people out with orders to misbehave, to create trouble, to break the law, because their mind is unbound. They're not able to keep that middle space where the sushumna, the opening to sushumna is. So bring that mindfulness to everything you do. Everything you do will become tapas. Hopefully not tamas. Tamas is darkness and inertia. Hopefully it becomes tapas. Your eating becomes fasting. Your speaking becomes a practice of silence. Making love becomes a practice of celibacy. The door to celibacy is through your sexuality, not despite your sexuality. That's why Swami Veda and Swami Rama would always tell people, get married, find a partner, exercise that part of your life mindfully so that you find within that experience the doorway into higher spirituality. To do that, you have to really know the person you're interacting with, which is the reason. If there is any reason for monogamy, that's the reason. It's a practice of concentration. So Swami Veda had this little formula for tapas that I really like, and I like it better and better the older I get. He said, tapas is not self-denial. Tapas is enjoyment through concentration. Bringing your concentration, bringing your mindful awareness into everything you do so that everything you do gets better. You eat better. You love better. You are more present with the people that you're in relationships with. The greatest yogis are not the ones off in the cave. This was a big lesson for Swami Veda. He had so many stereotypes about what it meant to be a great yogi. And here he is. He gets initiated by the greatest yogi in several centuries. And he went to Swamiji one day and he said, Swamiji, and he was a very advanced disciple of Swami Rama. No question about it. And he came to Swami Rama one day and he said, Swamiji, you have all of these very advanced monastic disciples living in caves in the Himalayas, doing their practice. Why can't I go? And Baba said to him, that's not for you. I need you here in the world. I have work to do in the world, and you need to do that work with me. And from that moment, Swami Veda got the message. This is my cave. This body. When I sit in meditation, when you sit in meditation, you enter the most sacred temple on the face of the earth. That is the most sacred place. And so Swamiji never had any bad feelings about not being a monk off in the caves of the Himalayas, not living up to his stereotypes. He was much more like the great 19th century yogi Shamcharan Lahari from Varanasi, otherwise known as Lahari Mahashaya in the tradition of Yogananda and Self-Realization Fellowship. He was a householder. He was married his entire time. And he was one of the very greatest yogis of the 19th century. So being a monk, that's just a special way to live a lifestyle that's conducive to spiritual practice. That's all it is. Isn't any kind of sign of advanced achievement. That's why every time Swami Veda tried to make me a Swami, I would say, I'd rather be a secret Swami. I'm going to be a Swami in disguise. Because part of what I realized is that when you put on all those orange clothes, people change their relationships with you. I've seen it happen so many times. It's happened even with Swami Vrindavan. And there are times when Vrindavan struggles to get out from under that robe of his. And, Ashu and I, for years before Swami Vrindavan became Swami Vrindavan, he was just Pandit Ananta, and we used to travel and teach together. We were incredible brothers in that work. So now, when Ashu and I are together in the ashram and we want to have a real conversation with our friend, we don't go see him in the office. Because when he's in the office, he has a Swami face on. He's wrapped in his robes. But at midnight, when he's having a cup of tea in his cottage, then we knock on the door. Because then we can talk to the person that we love. And I always want people to be able to talk to the person that they love. So unless there's a really good practical reason for me to do it, I'm going to just stay where I am. I'm sort of in the preliminary stage and I'll stay there. Everything is preliminary to enlightenment, so that's fine. But that's really what silence is about. It's about cultivating a heart that carries that presence, the presence of the Guru, the presence of a mother, the presence of a beloved friend. That's what silence is about. You learn to be a better friend to yourself and by to be a better friend to other people. There are other sort of techniques to the practice of silence. I'm sure that Ashu will spend some time with you working on walking meditation. And of course, there's the asana practice. And more to be said about those things. And, even though Ashu doesn't like it, I hope that Vaidas has the little pieces of paper. So if questions come up during the midst of your practice, you can write them down. And we'll address those questions as in the first part of the evening sessions. Once again, let me pause and just see if people have any questions.
Please feel free to ask the question. Don't take him seriously. Please, if you have a question, please. Because from tonight you will be going to silence. So.
This has a tendency to happen. I love this. I sit with a group of people and we talk about some topic. And somehow at the end of it, everybody's ready for meditation. Once I went to Hungary, used to teach a lot in Hungary. And I went to do my part of the teacher training program, which meant teaching 6 hours a day for 6 days. So I got to the end of that week. Then I had a whole day of mantra initiations to do. So did that. And then after the mantra initiations, I was scheduled to do a 4-hour public lecture. So I walked into the hall for that lecture, completely out of gas, completely exhausted. I sat down in front of those people and I went inside, as I usually do in the beginning, and I surrendered my seat to the guru and I said to him, look, you put me on this seat. I have nothing to offer. You have to give me something right now. So I sat there quietly. All of a sudden, a couple ideas began to bubble up. So I opened my eyes and I started talking about those ideas, and it flowed into a lovely session. And when that's happening, I can always hear when it's about to end. I can hear in my own thinking when I'm 5 or 6 paragraphs from the end. So that inkling came to me about the end of the talk. I looked at my phone to get the time, and 2 hours left. So I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? So for a moment, Professor Parker took over. Dangerous character. Watch out for him. Professor Parker took over and said, anybody have any questions? There were about maybe, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80 people in the room. And I looked around and I looked carefully, and all of the faces, their eyes were fixed. Everybody was just on the edge of meditation. So I looked at them and I said, oh, okay, go. We just sat there for 35 minutes. Beautiful. Not a stir, not a cough, not a sneeze, nothing. Quiet. We ended the 35 minutes. People had a few questions after that, and that brought the session to the end. So I rely on what flows from the guru. And I think Ashu will say now that he does the same thing when he's teaching. Most of the time, sometimes I come to a talk with a program, usually don't follow the program, usually go off and do whatever is flowing at that moment, because that's what connects my heart to your heart over so many thousands of miles. And what you have to remember is in the mind field, and Patanjali tells us in the Yoga Sutras, there is only one mind field. Mind is not an individual phenomenon. It is an ocean in which the entire universe exists. And in that mind field, there is no distance. No distance. So I am so happy to be with you today and to be with you in the process of this retreat over the next few days. I think we're pretty much to the end of our time. How are we doing on the schedule, Vaidas?
6:30 starts meal. Half an
Oh,
hour.
another half hour. Oh, what am I going to do?
5 left. I think we should let him rest now.
Wonderful to
Panditji,
see
it was great.
Shankara.
You may rest now. You may rest now. It was beautiful. So
Can I have my breakfast now?
you can have your breakfast. I know it's so early for you. So
I haven't even had my morning cup of coffee yet. All right. Take care, everybody. Enjoy each other's company. Today and this evening is about really strengthening that connection that you have with each other. So have a great time. And I envy you your ability to sit in the sauna. I miss sauna. I
yes,
live in
I'm
a
waiting for you.
I live
Yeah.
in a I live in a part of the United States with a lot of Finns. So sauna is a big part of life in Minnesota, and I don't get to do it often enough. So enjoy and enjoy the dinner.
Okay.
All right.
Love you,
Take care,
Swamiji.
everyone. Love you too.